Welcome to the ReWatcher. I'm your cult leader, Tom Pot, and I just watched The Punisher. And you're probably saying, Tom, you silly goose, you watched The Punisher last week. Well, astute viewer, I will say if you're looking at the video version, you can see a very minor difference. On my spray painted t-shirt, it's The Punisher 2004. How could you confuse The Punisher with The Punisher with the films? How could you confuse The Punisher with The Punisher, you know, the TV series and the video game? How could you confuse any of them with the comic? Well, I guess you wouldn't. I was going to say, how could you confuse it with the comic? You probably wouldn't. A lot of these aren't very much like the comics. Yes, last week we did the Dolph Lundgren Punisher, Punisher 1989. This week we're doing The Punisher 2004, featuring Thomas Jane. As mentioned, if you do want to see last week's episode, go back and have a look. Or if you want to see, you know, Punisher Warzone, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're in the middle of our Punisher series for the ReWatcher, and we're at the most high-profile Punisher project ever, possibly. I mean, definitely the most high-profile film, because the other ones are pretty much forgotten. I guess the only thing you could put against it would be the TV series, but I would argue that by the time the Netflix series got around to making the Punisher series, people were kind of over the Marvel Netflix series. It kind of felt like they were of varying quality and not really connected to the MCU. I don't know, maybe that's just my opinion. But anyway, this is certainly something that felt big at the time. And the reason it probably felt big is because this came out in 2004, and by 2004, superhero films had started to become franchises. You know, at this point we had Spider-Man, we had X-Men, the Hulk had a film the year before, and we also had Blade. And I bring up those ones for a specific reason, because in the early 2000s, superhero films were kind of like golden age comic books. They were cheesy and kind of goofy. Raimi's Spider-Man is probably the benchmark for that. And of course, like we see in Raimi's Spider-Man, when it's done right and when it's appropriate for the character, it absolutely works. On the other hand, we had Blade, which kind of didn't really treat itself as a comic book thing and just treated itself like a violent action film. And that worked for adults. I bring up those two different types of film because they don't go together. And it feels like at times they wanted the Punisher to be, you know, a kind of a superhero not kids, but a superhero film that was kind of cheesy and also something for the adults. But they never go all in on the adult stuff, they never go in on the superhero stuff. It doesn't really mix together. I don't know if you could really do that. Maybe you could get away with it today now that we've all grown up with the superhero film genre. But back then, I don't think if this was adult enough for the adults, and it was obviously, you know, probably, you know, too grown up for the kids, I guess. And because of that, it doesn't really satisfy anyone, in my opinion. But we'll get into that a bit more right now. I will say, as far as it being like the comic book, the closest it gets to being like the comic book is probably the intro, where it's like stylized comic book art. And it looks pretty good. I was going to say the soundtrack to this is not as good as last week's one. Last week's one that had the soundtrack, or had the theme. I'm trying to remember it now. I can't. I remember it was 4 notes. I'm just going to play it here. Very memorable, wasn't it? I guess not, because I couldn't remember it. But it's definitely better than this. The sound, like the music in this film in general, is not good. But the theme is like da 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 da. It's like terrible. Yeah, what is that like? Sorry, I can't play the actual music. I had to sing it myself. I'll probably get a copyright claim because that was so damn accurate there. But it's not good either way. And then we have, I think that actually I will say the soundtrack to this I think was a big deal. Like I think it sold well when it came out. It was full of all that, like, you know, new metal and angry rock that the 2000s had, where it was just white guys that were shouting about their problems and like, oh, I'm gonna break something, I'm gonna fuck you up, bro. Because I think like the main song in this is like by Drowning Pool, who did Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, which you know, this song is called Step Up, and it's like, do you want to step up? You will get knocked down. You wanna step up, you're gonna get knocked down. Terrible. Well, will our film get better from here? Not really. Well, first of all, when you consider where the Punisher is based, you probably think Marvel Universe, New York. Nope. Idiot. It's set in Tampa, Florida. And parts of it is in Puerto Rico. So I don't know why. I guess they were just like, back then you didn't have to be like faithful to where a comic was here. You can just like, set wherever, who cares? But yeah, it's set in Tampa. And I don't think it matters too much. Like, New York isn't as pivotal to the Punisher, I think, as it is to other characters. Like, you couldn't do Spider-Man and be like, hey, we're setting it in Tampa. Like, oh, okay. This is a very strange intro. And maybe it worked at the time better, but now we all, of course, can say, like, hey, that's Thomas Jane, he's the Punisher. But back then, maybe they wouldn't have known that, because we're in the middle of a sting operation, during the middle of a drug bust, I guess. I don't know, what am I trying to say? A drug deal? There we go. God, that was very uncool. It's a drug deal, alright? That's what it's called, I think. So we have a gangster and a gangster's accomplice. He's the son of a bigger gangster called Howard Saint, who is our villain. So this is the son of the villain of the movie. So, his time is probably numbered in this film. And he's, accompanied also with a Russian man with a confusingly blonde wig. Oh, could that be the Punisher undercover? No, it couldn't be. No. He's wearing a blonde wig. It couldn't be. It's a terrible wig, by the way. It would never have worked. This is why this is really confusing, okay? Because the FBI show up, and it devolves into a big shootout. Of course, this leads to the death of the son of that gangster, and also seemingly the death of the man in the blonde wig. So obviously that is Frank Castle, right? That's obviously the Punisher. So I guess the FBI, because he's geared up with blood packs and squibs. So I guess they just showed up expecting to shoot, and that'll be a shootout, or else they were always going to shoot him. So yeah, great police work there. We're just going to show up and start shooting people, and hopefully it'll work out. But at least we can fake his death. I know, stupid, dumb. I guess it was just because they wanted that one moment, later on, when if people had no idea what they were getting into, that moment where Thomas Jane sits up out of a body bag, people would have been like, oh! Which, if you fell for that, you're an idiot, to be honest. But yeah, it did lead to the death of the son of Howard Saint, who is the villain in the movie, played by John Travolta, because, bless their hearts. Imagine, in 2004, John Travolta was still in films that actually went to cinemas. Wow, what a time to be alive. Speaking of wigs, his wig game is on point for this. Way to go, you're looking good, Johnny. Of course, like every cop movie, he had one day to retirement, because Frank Castle now is retiring at a very young age for whatever reason. He's retiring to Puerto Rico, apparently, because he takes his wife and his kid and off they go to Puerto Rico. Meanwhile, back in Tampa, I nearly said back in New York. Whew, could you imagine? The guy who is the accomplice, I don't know who this actor is, I can't remember. He looks like Barry. He reminds me of Barry, the dentist in Friends that Rachel was going to marry. It's not him, I don't think, but anyway. He's like an accomplice to the gangster. I think he's like an accountant or something. So, I don't know. He was there at the shootout, I guess. And he's getting blamed for leaving his son get involved as a result. So, because of that, he gets a few punches. They're like, oh, we let you make bail because if you were sent to prison, we could have had you killed in there if we wanted you dead. One guy says you could have had you killed in a very pornographic way, where I'm like, Jesus, these guys are fucked up. Are we going to see something really dangerous and violent from this gangster to show how dangerous they are? Oh no, he doesn't know. Howard Saint comes in and gives him a lecture, and then that's it. So I'm like, oh, that could have been a moment to show how bad this guy was, because obviously the Punisher is pretty bad, so maybe we could see if this gangster is worse. No, apparently we don't. So, in Puerto Rico, I can't believe we're now in Puerto Rico, it's very strange. We have apparently a big family reunion between the Punisher, Frank Castle, and his wife's family. So there's a lot of people there. One of those people is Roy Scheider, by the way. Frank's dad is Roy Scheider, the guy from Jaws. Crazy. I was actually like, why is he in this? And I looked it up. Apparently he's in this because he's the director's neighbour. So fair enough. He's barely in the film. Of course he's going to get killed, because in the midst of the funeral of his son, John Travolta's character is like, what do you know? Who did this? And they're like, it's Frank Castle. And his wife is like, hears all this, because they were both in mourning in a limo when they're being told this. And you're expecting the wife to maybe chime in and be the voice of reason, because she goes, the family. And you're like, oh, she's going to be like, oh, the family, don't hurt the family. No, she's like, the family, kill them all, kill them too. She's like fucking Emperor Palpatine, she's like, wipe them all out.
His family. His whole family.
Wipe them out. All of them.
They weren't joking. It's honestly kind of funny. It's kind of hilarious, and it shouldn't be. I know it shouldn't be, but it is pretty funny, because if you're thinking normally, oh yeah, Frank's family gets killed, it's like his wife and his kid. No, it's his wife and his kid and his dad and his mom and his brother-in-law and his second cousin. Like everyone ever. All his in-laws are dead as well. It's like, it's kind of funny. They're all gathered in Puerto Rico and the gangsters show up and start shooting at them. Like, I don't know. I think the movie had a sense of humour here. because there's some stuff in this scene that is okay. I think for me it would have worked more if it was more violent, more bloody. Because I think it really needs a like. I think you need that in a film like this, and they didn't want to go all the way ever in this film, seemingly. But I also think it would have worked to kind of sell the, how savage these gangsters were, and they really don't do that. But it's kind of like they must have thought it was funny at times because they do some things that are kind of comedic, like watching people trying to escape. Like some people try to escape in a boat, they got gunned down, which is kind of funny, and then a guy really shittily tries to get away on a scooter and get shot as well. So it's like there must be some level of humor here, or at least some degree of awareness when they shot this. There's even a comedy cut here where Frank's wife and the kid's like, "What about Dad?" She's like, "Your father will be fine," and then it cuts to him like killing people. I'm like, "Oh, come on." It's also kind of hilarious that the gangsters picked the wrong time to start killing his whole family, because at this exact moment, Frank's dad, Roy Scheider, was showing Frank his antique gun collection he just restored. That's right, he has all the guns. So Frank is like killing people, shooting people. At one point he explodes a barbecue, and I swear to God, it explodes like 10 times. It's awesome. So he starts chasing after the gangsters because they're chasing down Frank's wife and kids. I want to talk about the stunts, I guess, in this moment. I don't think the stunts in this film are very safe at all, in general, in the film. And I will get to why I think that. They don't look very safe here in the car chase, because there's just guys in the flatbed. They're pouncing and bouncing all over the place. I was really worried they were going to fall out. And like what you want with a good stunt is that it looks dangerous, but that like you're not worried for the performers. Here I was really worried for the performers. I was like, this does not look safe. There's one moment where I think like a boat crushes one of the cars, and I was like, Jesus, that does not look good. Like they look like they're in serious danger. There's one moment where a car rolls as well, and it's so clearly launched. But anyway, Frank's family is mowed down. I don't mean by gunfire. They're literally rolled over. They're knocked down. And Frank, in a really actually heartbreaking moment, is very good. I'm sure it was in all the trailers, where he's like, he runs up and he's like, "Maria!" And he gets to his family dead. And at the worst possible case of timing, as he's mourning his family, we see that they were run over on a pier, and the pier course ends. So we see the car that mowed them down is coming back, and now Frank faces them down with a gun. He starts facing them off, but he's outgunned, outnumbered. They shoot him. I think they shoot him in the knee. Frank gets totally fucked up here. To it all again, and almost like the movie has a hilarious case of extremeness. It's overkill in every bit. And he gets like shot in the knee. Then he gets like beaten up a little bit. They kick him into a load of canoes. There's a sentence. They kick him into a load of canoes. They beat the shit out of him. They shoot him in the chest, seemingly through the heart. They light a fire all around him. For some reason they don't throw petrol on him. I guess that was a step too far. They light the pier on fire. So it's not enough that he would burn to death. Then there's an explosion and he gets launched into the water, and it looks so funny when he gets thrown. He's kind of like rigid. He's like, "Rrr!" And he's dead. No, he's not. He survives straight away. There's no real explanation for how he survives. It just cuts to a scene later on, and he's with a guy getting off a boat. Some months later, he's got a beard. He's got a crutch, which he immediately throws away. So I guess, he was fine. No explanation for how he survived, really. I guess that guy just saved his life, and he was grand. But anyway, sure, fine, whatever. This is 37 minutes into the film, by the way. So it takes its time doing all that stuff. I also want to talk about something that's totally unnecessary, right? The Skull t-shirt. Iconic. Wonderful. Simple. Okay? Why? Because the Punisher brings death, the skull means death. Pirates have been doing it for centuries. We get it. There's no complexity. There's no... there's no hidden message to it. But I guess they were like, we need something here. It couldn't just be as simple like Frank is like, I want to kill people, so I'm going to put a skull on me. They need something to give it a case of the origin story. Because Frank's son was at a gift shop in Puerto Rico, and he saw a t-shirt that had a skull, and he was like, this is cool. And the guy was like, oh yeah, well this wards off evil spirits. So he bought the t-shirt for his dad. And when he gets back after, when he drops the crutch 5 months later and survives, he goes back to the house and he finds that t-shirt. You don't need an origin story. It's like a case of the prequels or something for a skull logo, because we get it. It's a skull. He's the Punisher. It makes sense. Skull means death. It's not a very deep metaphor. We don't need that. It also makes me wonder, like, if he had gone to a gift shop and been like, Dad, I got you this, and it's like, I heart Puerto Rico. Would he have been going around the whole time being like, I heart Puerto Rico, or something? I went to Puerto Rico and all I got was this crappy t-shirt. It's hilarious in some regards. But anyway, that's all going on. And here's where the movie takes a very weird diversion, because Frank then moves back to Tampa. He goes into an apartment where he now lives. And again, this is that thing where it makes me feel like at times like they thought they were dealing with a different superhero. They wanted the Punisher to be something else because it doesn't feel like the Punisher. He goes to an apartment. He starts hiding guns and weapons all around his house. He does up a car like a Punisher mobile. It feels like they were like, let's just do Batman with guns, I guess, and Puerto Rico. Batman with guns in Puerto Rico. That's what the alternate title for this film was. The reason the film takes a weird turn here is because they also introduce 3 side characters, and I can't stand any of them. I hate all of them. There's Ben Foster, Ben Foster is an actor where I'm like, he's either, he's always giving it his all, but sometimes not well. That's one of these times. Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's bad. Here he's like, edgy goth. He's got like piercings, and he's like, yeah, man. They have the fat character, and I would not just reduce him to that, but that's literally all the characterization they give him. His name is just Bumpo. Come on, man. He's meant to be the comedic relief, I guess. He's not. Him and Ben Foster, I guess, are meant to be the comedic relief when they're paired together. They're not funny. They're awful. And then we have Rebecca Romijn, who plays Joan, who's like a love interest to Frank. She's Mystique in the X-Men films, but she's covered in blue makeup. You never got to see what she really looks like. She looks here. She looks great. So I don't know why you cover her in blue makeup all the time. But anyway. And when all this happened, I was like, okay, I don't know. I don't like when you just get introduced to all these characters 40 minutes into a film, and now I'm meant to give a shit about these characters that are clearly just boring. And the movie nearly got me back on its side, because we get look, I will always fall for a car screeching around a corner at night, and we get that. I'm like, fuck yeah. And then I get a moment where I'm like, this is going to be just like the Punisher, because Frank has kidnapped Barry the dentist from the gangsters, and he's got a blowtorch and goggles, and you're like, oh man, he's going to go all. This is where the movie gets dark. This is where it's going to be Punisher-y. Nope. I guess they were like, it's not the Punisher, it's the Funisher, haha, because he's got that blowtorch, and he gives a speech, and he's like, when someone gets burnt with this, it kills all their cells so they don't feel the pain. They're just going to feel cold, and they'll smell, burning meat. And you're like, oh, fuck, it's going to be metal, badass. No, he hangs up the guy by his ankles from a chain from the ceiling, and he goes behind him and uses the blowtorch on a stake so he can smell burning meat, and he gets a popsicle and rubs it on his back. Ha 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 ha. So the guy thinks his back is burning, and now he's like scared the guy enough where he's like, you're going to help me take down the Saints. So he gets the lowdown from him. He's like, he hears about Howard Saint, which is John Travolta. He hears about his wife, and he hears about his right-hand man. I can't remember that character's name. It's something Glass. He's like, here, do some research, figure out about these guys. Like, the wife always goes here. She always goes to cinema. The other guy always goes here. The right-hand man always goes here. The right-hand man, he finds out after a bit of research, is gay. Which apparently in 2004, or I guess it was because either it's because he's a mobster, that would be a serious thing that he could be blackmailed over, or just because it was the early 2000s and that was apparently something to be ashamed of. So, it's really weird. And it's really weird for a couple of reasons. Because, as I'll get to in a minute, I don't think they wanted this character to be the Punisher. I think they were hoping like they could just do whatever and they could put the Punisher label on and it would work. Because, like, they make the Punisher out to be way more elaborate and scheming and plan-based than he normally is. I mean, the guy just walks into place with guns and blows everyone away. That's kind of his MO, I will say, they also make him out to be a total dumbass. Like, what is one advantage Frank has here? They all think he's dead, right? Within, like, 2 minutes, he shows up to in front of a courthouse where they're talking to cops that he knows from before, and a news crew, and he's like, what are you doing? You haven't arrested anyone about my wife's murder 5 months later. And that's it. That's what he came there to do. And now all the news and media have taken care of it. And now the mob know he's alive. Well done, Frank. You've got to use that advantage. But no, why bother? So I should say, this Howard Saint guy, he is a gangster, but he's more of the gangster that helps the other families by laundering their money. And when Frank finds this out, he goes to one of these buildings, bursts in, and like threatens everyone, takes their money and throws it out the window. He's like, oh, fuck your money, I guess. So we then get a really weird shot in the lobby, actually, I want to mention briefly. Because it's like a Western. like Frank has like guns and he's like, it's like him and two gangsters, and then he shoots them, and of course because this is the 2000s and they thought they wanted it to look cool and I guess look better if it was in slow motion or something. They got shot through massive panes of glass that are inexplicably there. Thanks for that. I don't know why you decided to make it a Western all of a sudden, but sure. Maybe you could have just doubled down and done a Western the whole time and it would have worked. But no, you didn't. You did it for that scene, and that's kind of it. Although maybe there's some illusions later on actually, but again, it feels like they didn't have really an idea of how to do this. At this point, it's kind of strange, okay? Actually, I want to say one thing, right? After all this, like Frank is at home and he has keep in mind now, it was like 20 minutes since his family were killed. He has like flashbacks, he's like about his family and stuff, and I guess it was to remind the audience, but also that he's traumatized. Like, yeah, we get he's traumatized already. You know, you don't have to remind us that. But also 20 minutes in, like it happened 20 minutes ago. You don't need to give us a flashback. You know, we get it. Obviously, I should say as well, John Travolta isn't good in this. He gives the John Travolta performance where he just phones it in. It's okay, I guess. It's not good. Thomas Jane is decent as the Punisher. I don't think physically, like he is pretty ripped, but I don't think he like fully embodies the Punisher in what I picture. When I picture the Punisher, I picture like a wrestler, you know, like jacked to the fucking gills. He's not that, but I think he gives a good performance, and I think he actually gives a better performance. It's something I'll talk about later on. But yeah, anyway, I don't think anyone else necessarily gives a great performance in the film. But anyway, because he was robbed and because of the money is now an issue, Saint is kind of being told by the other families, like, can you even guarantee our money's safety? And he's like, I promise, I will take care of it. You can trust me. Blah blah blah. This is what leads to the two best moments in the film. Okay, because he gets like people to go after Frank. Okay, as I said, the music in the film isn't good, but we do get a scene 2 seconds later where I'm like, hey, this is a pretty decent song, because one of the killers sent after Frank is a guy that just, for some reason, I guess they could never have the side characters separated from each other, even though you could have had a moment here to build your love interest between Frank and Joan, whatever. All the roommates are in this diner, and so is Frank, because I guess Frank just hangs around with them now, even though he doesn't seem to like them very much for most of the film. There's no one else in this diner until this guitar man comes in and starts playing a song, and he's like, you know, all this time will pass away. It's actually a pretty good song. He threatens him, and then Frank's like, it's a good song, and he goes, yeah, I'm going to play it at your funeral. And you're like, oh shit. And the good thing is here, it's like a fake out, because you're waiting the whole time for him to pull a gun out of the guitar case, but he never does. But Frank leaves, and he's in his Punisher mobile, and he drives. And at this moment, the guitar man emerges behind him. There's a bridge going up, and the cars come behind him, and you're thinking, oh damn, are we going to get them jumping over a bridge or something? Yeah, man. So, of course, car crashes into him. We start seeing some of the gadgets Frank has put into his car, which are basically just bulletproof shields over stuff. He starts doing that. There's like a bit of a car chase. There's not much of a one. They're shooting at each other. Frank has to skid to avoid a kid with a ball, because isn't there always that happening? Every time there's a big chase, oh my god, that idiot kid is chasing a ball onto the road. Ah! Frank skids, the car flips, and Frank is like thrown to the side. And the guy comes out with his gun, and he's kind of like, you know, I've got you now, whatever, ha ha ha. And Frank's got a knife. And the guy is like, you just brought a knife to a gunfight. And Frank presses a button, and the blade from the knife shoots out and gets him right in this road, and he gushes blood, and then dies. I mean, he doesn't gush too much, but it could be a little bit bloodier, because it just looks like he's like, ugh. You know, like he's just squeezing a blood pack, with it in his hand, and then it falls to the floor, which is probably what he did. And then, you know, that's one of the assassins taken care of. Pretty good, right? Now, I do want to take this moment to talk about what Frank's plan is, because it's all over the shop, mate. Alright? Frank's plan, okay? As I said, Frank's right-hand man is a closeted gay man, okay? And the Punisher, Frank, takes photos of him being gay, kissing a guy, okay? His wife, as I mentioned, always goes to the cinema. So Frank's plan is that he blackmails the gay gangster. He says, go here to this hotel, or I'll sell you the photos. If you're not there, I'm going to give the photos to Howard. Right, okay. While doing this, he goes to the gangster's wife's car and steals it, puts it in front of a fake fire hydrant, so the wife gets a ticket. So it gets a ticket at the hotel where the gay character is. So it looks to Howard Saint, John Travolta's character, that his wife is having an affair with his friend, his right-hand man. What are you doing? He also steals her earrings, by the way, and puts it in his friend's bed so it looks like she was sleeping with him. It's like such a weirdly lateral move. It's like too like Machiavellian for the Punisher. It's like, what are you doing here? You could there's easier ways to do this, but that's his plan. It's just very, very strange. Anyway, that's the action scene. But after that is that he kills the guitar guy. It was actually a pretty decent action scene. It felt like it could have been great, but it was too short. Anyway, so we are not done with the people coming after Frank, though. This is the best scene in the movie. It's also what leads me to say the stunts in this film weren't particularly safe. Because Frank, I should also say, Howard is now falling out with the mobsters whose money he has, because they're like, can you guarantee our money? And he's like, I've got more guns than you. I'm not afraid of you, kind of thing. And he is tricked by his neighbours to have dinner with them. And so they're having dinner. I will also say that Joan at one point had an abusive ex that Frank takes care of very quickly, so because of that she's kind of falling for him a little bit. He doesn't really care at all. It's a very cheap writing, to just be like, oh, he took care of the ex, therefore she loves him now. It's just stupid. I don't know why you need a romantic subplot for Frank Castle and a neighbour anyway, especially because she's not in the film enough and they're only introduced 40 minutes into the film, so why bother at all? This scene is where we get the second person that is trying to kill Frank. A character dubbed the Russian, who was in the comics. He was an ugly looking character in the comics. I think he was drawn by Steve Dillon, who has worked on some comics I really like, but I don't love his art. He looks like a big Popeye villain. He's got a red and white striped shirt and he's got peroxide white blonde hair. And he's played by big, sexy, Diesel himself, Kevin Nash. I'm not just saying he's big and sexy. That's a wrestler thing. He's a former wrestler. He's the NWO, the Outsiders. Although I suppose he is sexy. If you don't know him as a wrestler, maybe you know him from Magic Mike, where he probably was big and sexy. So, of course, when you hire a wrestler, you're going to get a cool physical action scene. And that's what you get here. It's the best scene in the movie by far. Honestly, the best experience you could have with this movie. Look that scene up online. Watch it. It's the best you get. Now, again, they kind of ruin it at times where you go into awkward comedy with these side characters. Like, they're in the other apartment. They're in Joan's apartment, like Goth and the fat guy. They're like dancing to classical opera, which means the whole music, or the whole fight scene is set to opera, which is also bad. So they're like fighting away. It's really physical. And what I love here is like, they try to pay off all the weapons Frank has hidden around the apartment, and you're thinking like, oh, that's how he's going to win. But anytime he pulls one out, your man just totally like ruins it. Like Frank pulls a gun out and he just drops the dumbbell on and the gun is broken. Like he just looks at the gun. It's like such like a, it's like a Looney Tunes shot. He's like Wile E. Coyote kind of, So they're fighting away, and it's pretty decent. It's very physical. They're punching and fighting at one point, and this happened for real. He takes out a knife and stabs him right there. And apparently during filming, they grabbed the wrong knife. They didn't grab a track one. They grabbed one that didn't have a point. I listened to an interview with Kevin Nash where he talked about this, where they clipped the point off it, but it was still, it didn't retract. So he stabbed him right in the bone. And they kept that in the film apparently. And apparently the reason, like, he was like, what they're like, what can we do about this? Like I think they were really worried he was going to sue. And I mean, like, remember, like, Brandon Lee got killed on a set, and this is the level of safety you have here. Like, if that was a lesser man, he could have just been actually stabbed and killed. They were really lucky, but like apparently they were like, what are you going to, what can we do to make this right? And he was like, just have beer for everyone at the end of the day, like the cast and the crew and everyone. And they're like, okay, cool, sign this, because they came off lightly there, and apparently that's what they did.
What can we do to make this right? I said, man, it's so hot. I said, if it's possible, we could just have beer at the end of the day, like some Miller Lite, like on ice. I said, and they said, will you sign off on that? I said, absolutely. So we're sitting there, and I said, make sure there's some for the crew too, not just the cast.
So yeah, I'm sure that really endeared Nash to the rest of the cast. But yeah, the fight in general is just really good. They're like throwing each other against things. It's like, this is why I say it's like a cartoon. There's a moment where Frank had a grenade stash. He's thrown into the bathroom. He has a grenade stashed. He throws it through a window at the Russian. The Russian bats it back in. So it's now in the bathroom with Frank again, who has to dive into the tub to survive. It's great. He's like slamming his head in a fridge as well. It's kind of comedic again. And that's what I find really strange about the tone of this movie. Like, were they self-aware? But also they don't go far enough into it for it to work. Another reason I say the stunts aren't safe. Thomas Jane nearly killed himself, knocked himself out. There's a moment where he's thrown through a wall by the Russian, and it's apparently a stunt where he had to be put through a wall. And according to Nash, and again, I think it really looks that way when you watch it, he did the stunt himself. He threw himself through drywall. Now, there's drywall here, there's brick wall here. There's not a lot of space between them. He threw himself through the drywall, went flying, and went headfirst into the brick wall. Knocked himself out. Really safe set we've got there, guys. Way to go. One fight scene, some guy got stabbed. There's people nearly falling out of trucks. There's guys going headfirst into walls. A stereo movie, by the way. If that had gone really wrong, the whole film could have fallen apart. But way to go. And then it ends kind of disappointingly, I will say. They like getting a big fight. It stumbles into the apartment where all the friends are in. He throws burning oil on him. His face gets disgustingly bubbly and stuff. And they tackles him, sending him down the stairs. The Russian breaks his neck, but Frank manages to survive. And again, they kind of go for a comedic thing again here, where he's like, where Frank stands up and they're all looking at him, and he's like, oh, I'm all right. He's not, and then he like passes out. Again, weirdly comedic. So at this point, they're fixing up Frank, trying not to bring him to a hospital. Which apparently another instance where Thomas Jane got hurt. Rebecca Romijn was fake sewing him up, and apparently went so far that she was actually digging into his skin. So awesome, really cool set, guys. While doing this, he's like hidden in a kind of bunker I guess Frank has made, and the other two guys, Ben Foster and Bumbo, are confronted by Howard Saint's men, who are like, "Where is Castle? Where is he?" Again, it probably would have been a good idea not to, reveal yourself, Frank. Could have just pretend you were dead. So they start threatening him, and they won't give him up. And to interrogate the guy, Ben Foster has like these 3 lip piercing things, and they start pulling out his piercings to intimidate him. But he doesn't give up, Frank. Way to go. You're really cool. This is actually kind of what you needed. It's a good and intense scene, actually. And it actually makes them kind of threatening. It could have been done earlier. Honestly, it feels more like something the Punisher would do. But instead he's, sucking on popsicles and putting them on dudes' backs or whatever. It's really forced, though. He doesn't talk. He's like, "You're one of us. You're family." And I'm like, you've known this guy like a day. He's the guy who barely says a word to you. He came to dinner and said, I don't know if he even said thanks for dinner. And that was it. But you're family all of a sudden. Oh, fuck off. It's just really forced and rushed. They haven't even had a conversation really, have they? I don't know. And then like he's getting ready to like, he's gearing up for our big finale. He's putting on his stuff, and like, I think at one stage like Joan is like, "What makes them different from you?" And they're like, "They've got something to lose." And you're like, "Oh shit!" And he's like, "If you want peace, prepare for war." All these badass lines that work for a trailer. So at this point, the dentist guy Barry has the ticket that Howard Saint's wife has got, and she gives it to Howard. She's like, "Oh, where? There's a ticket. Should I take care of it?" And it's like, "Oh, where was that ticket? Oh, it was at this hotel." And then it's like, "Huh, that's the same hotel you said my right-hand man was at." And they're like, "Huh, what a weird coincidence." And of course, at this point, Barry has dropped the earring that Frank got into the henchman's bed. Howard Saint looks in the bed and sees an earring, and he's like, "Oh." So of course now, again, really elaborate, really pointless. Why didn't you just fake the ticket? Frank Castle has too much time in his hands. So we get a real melodramatic scene, which is kind of awesome for how cheesy and awful it is, where like Howard Saint is in the room and the henchman is there, and it's lightning flashing, and he's like, "Oh, I challenge you to a duel." He actually challenges him to a duel. He tries to explain. He's like, "Back in the day, if you were to this," and he's like, "I accuse you," and they get into a fight, but it's never exciting. Because the henchman never puts up a fight. He's like, "What are you doing, Howard? We're friends." And he just gets killed. It's like you're waiting for it like to be a big fight between them, really dramatic and lightning flashing. No, he's like, "Oh, don't do this. We're friends. We've been friends forever." And he just kills him. And that's it. He just accepts it. I don't know. Frank could have just killed him. Like, what's the point? Ugh. So he just turns them against each other. If it wasn't for that, like, the movie would barely be, like, it wouldn't be a very long movie at all, you know. But apparently they just put all this plot in about Frank doing all this elaborate planning. It's just ridiculous. It's like a weird prank. So I don't know. I also was thinking, like, what's a way I can say this without leaving myself open to lawsuits? The closeted gay thing in a film with John Travolta. I don't know. I'm just going to say that. So at this point, he's also like, now he's like, oh, I also have to kill the wife because she cheated on me. So he throws her off a bridge, really high up, and it's also a bridge over train tracks, so she gets run over by a train. I don't know. And then he makes, like, later on his other son, Howard Saint's other son, is like, you know, where's you know, this guy? And it's like, oh, you know, he's whatever, he's gone. And they're like, oh, where's mom? And he says something like, oh, she had to catch a train, like some weird pun like that.
Where's Quentin?
Oh, well, he's wrapped up in something.
Called home, no one was there.
His mother's gone.
What?
She took the train.
What is this movie? What is this movie meant to be? It just doesn't suit the rest of the movie. At this point, Frank has now, you know, come to the gangster's mansion, ready to kill everyone, basically. He's got loads of guns, loads of bombs. I don't know. Some of the deaths are hilarious. Like, one of them is literally reminded me of, like, when you'd have in Hitman. Like, he puts, like, a bomb in, like, a champagne thing, and they're like, send up more champagne. He's like, coming right up, and they send it up, and it blows up. So they're shooting away. They're like, Frank is in a bulletproof vest by now. I think the look he has here is actually really cool. He's got, like, a bulletproof vest with the Punisher skull on it. But it's just like a standard shootout. It looks okay. Again, it feels like it could have been more violent, a bit gritty. At one point, he takes a shotgun point blank to the chest with the vest on, and he's just fine. So, I don't know, movie logic, I guess. And then we have, actually, I should say, even though I said the movie wasn't, like, violent, we get the most violent moment in the film. I'm not even sure if I'll show it on YouTube, but it jumps out because of how violent it is in a film that isn't that violent otherwise, where he puts a knife through a guy, the underside of a guy's chin. It goes through his chin, and you can see the blade through his open mouth. And you're like, Jesus Christ. That's like Friday the 13th. Where did that come from? I don't know. It just feels out of place because of the rest of the movie. So he has managed to get... Like, it's so strange. He manages to get... Again, it's real. The movie overthinks itself so many times. Where you're like... It's trying to make the Punisher cool, but really it just makes him a dork. So, the other son is now pinned with one of his hands, right? And he's, like, pinned down. Frank comes in, and he puts a bomb in his other hand with a string tied to the trigger. And he's like, "This is, you like, do you ever do isometric exercise? This weighs this many pounds. How long can you keep it up? If you don't, it's gonna blow up." So he does that, and he has to hold the bomb up, and Frank walks away. Which, you know, if you're that guy and you're like, "I'm gonna die anyway," wouldn't you just leave go over straight away and kill Frank as well? No, you wouldn't. Whatever, I guess not. So, because of this, he now walks out to confront Howard Saint. He goes out and screams, and he's like, "Howard Saint!" And he's like, "You killed, like, you're like, oh, you killed my family, blah, blah, blah." And Howard Saint is like, "You killed my son." And as he's saying this, you hear, "No!" Explosion back, and he's like, "Both of them." And he's like, "Oh, you son of a bitch." And the thing is, like, there's not really a big climactic fight here. I think he, like, shoots him, and then just, like, what does he do? He, like, ties him to a car, and the car drives off and drags him. But again, it's not that, like, it's that violent or anything. He ties Travolta to a car with a bomb in it. That's it. And the car is going towards a... Oh, no, he lights him on fire as well, I think. Does he? He's on fire anyway at some point. So, he's... Yeah, he lights him on fire. He's lit on fire, being dragged by a car with a bomb in it. It's just really elaborate, like, and you're like, this is overkill. Again, the movie does that a lot. And the car drives towards a load of other cars, which apparently have bombs in them. And it explodes. And that's where I guess a lot of the movie budget went, because there's a load of explosions and he's like walking in slow motion, you know, some of those shots. He's officially become the Punisher, and if you weren't aware of it before, it shows an above shot where we see all the exploded cars are burning to form the Punisher logo. So I guess Frank had so much spare time that he attached bombs strategically to cars and maybe a bit of petrol, so it would look like the Punisher logo from above where nobody is to appreciate it. What? Frank has too much spare time. I said it earlier, I'm saying it again now. Also, like, I mean, if he set off a bomb next to a car, how he doesn't know that the car next to it won't be set up. It could have just, it's stupid. But anyway, Frank, one thing I do like here, and it's kind of a weird thing to like, but Frank has basically now got his revenge, and at the end of the film, he's sitting there. He puts a gun in his mouth and he's about to kill himself. But then he thinks of his wife and he doesn't. And I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting, because the Punisher probably would do that. He probably would just be like, my purpose is fulfilled, and he finds a deeper meaning. And something that Joan said to him beforehand was that you kind of realize that good memories can save you, and he remembers his wife and he saves himself. So it's kind of like, hey, the movie did something kind of clever there. It actually followed through on something it thought about. But so he goes off to kill more people, and we get another cheesy line where someone's like, where Joan is like, well, again, the romantic interest went nowhere. I don't think they even kissed at the end. He's just walking away, and she's like, where are you going? And it's like, oh, I got work to do. And it's like, she's like, will I hear from you again or something? And he's like, oh, well, you'd see me in the papers. And she's like, what section? Which, again, you're like, who would think that question? You'll see me in the papers. Oh, what section of the newspaper? Well, he goes, the obituaries. And, they were like, yeah, it's so cool. Dork. The Punisher is a real dork in this. He also says, like, check your apartment. I left something there for you. And the neighbour's going, and there's a load of sacks of money. So I guess, yeah, cool. They're all rich now, I suppose. They can move out of that shitty apartment. And then we have Frank on the bridge. And it starts fading in, and we kind of see a silhouette of him and just the kind of skull, pretty much. It's at sunset. And he goes, like, this big monologue. He's like, like murderers, rapists. They're all going to suffer. Scumbags, so you're all dead. Frank Castle is dead. I am the Punisher. And you're like, oh, yeah. And as much as you could leave that moment sink in, it won't last long, because immediately we get, well, if you want to step up! Over the credits. And it's awful. Right. This movie is okay. It's not a good Punisher film at all. It's mildly entertaining. It's all over the place. It's really inconsistent in that regard. It kind of feels like an origin film that sets up for him to become the Punisher. I kind of feel like if you tweak this, you could make it a better film. But it feels like the movie doesn't want to fully commit to the Punisher character. I feel like it just doesn't get the Punisher character right. And because of that, the whole movie falls apart, because it's totally all over the place. It just kind of reeks of a studio saying, we need this, and we want this, and they don't realize what they're trying to do. I don't know. I think they wanted to make a superhero film, and they were like, oh, the Punisher isn't like a superhero, and they were like, oh damn, let's just make him a bit more like a superhero, and it doesn't really work for me. It's kind of all over the place. As I said, the highlights, the best things about the film, Thomas Jane is decent as the Punisher. His fight scenes and action scenes are pretty good, especially the ones when the guy with the guitar and Kevin Nash are coming after him. Aside from that, not great. But it is interesting, okay? It says like they didn't really have the necessary budget or time they wanted to make the movie they wanted to make. That's what they say. Possibly that's the case, I don't know. But it did alright. It made its budget back box office wise. And it did decent on home video. It made a lot of money. There was apparently a massive amount of surprise by how well the movie did on home video. So there was a lot of talk for sequels. And it seemingly sounded like there was plans for the character outside this. They made a video game that I mentioned briefly at the start. That wasn't a tie-in game. It features some plots from it. But it came out I think on consoles it came out the following year. But it was actually voiced by Thomas Jane as well. A pretty good game, actually. Not terrible, anyway. There was a lot of talk of a sequel, as I mentioned, which I'll get to in a sec. There was also, and this is something that's an urban legend, I have to look into it, I don't know if this has ever been confirmed. In Spider-Man 2, there is a scene where Mary Jane is running from her wedding, and there's a character that kind of turns and looks at her kind of towards the camera. Now, it's not Thomas Jane, but it looks a lot like the Punisher. And the rumour that went around the internet was that was Thomas Jane's stunt double. And he couldn't make it to film the cameo, so they put him in his place. And the idea was that at some point, the Punisher and Spider-Man could cross over. I have no idea if there's any truth to that. It seems like an urban legend, but it's an interesting one. But certainly it does seem like there was plans for this character after this film, because there was talk for a sequel for a long time. And the director was meant to come back. Jonathan Hensleigh was the director. He, again, was not really known for directing. He was a kind of writer, and his stuff wasn't always good anyway. I mean, the other writer of this film, I'm trying to remember what he wrote, but it wasn't good. Let's see if I can have a quick look here. Michael France, who wrote Cliffhanger 1993. He wrote Hulk, and he wrote Fantastic Four. He wrote GoldenEye as well, but let's not give him that credit. He wrote Hulk, Punisher, and Fantastic Four in subsequent years, and they're all bad. Well, way to go, whatever your name is, France. Michael France, I think his name is. I've already forgotten, and good riddance. But the film never materialized. It went through different director changes, it went through different writer changes. By about 2007, Kurt Sutter, who had worked on The Shield and went on to make Sons of Anarchy, had written a script, and apparently Thomas Jane read it and was kind of like, I don't want to make a film where it doesn't feel like it is what I want. He wanted to apparently make a film that was very faithful to the character. And he kind of said he wishes them all best. Now, as it turns out, that sequel would basically be reworked into Punisher Warzone. So it is like Punisher Warzone is a reboot, but it's kind of a loose reboot in that it was originally intended as a sequel. But Thomas Jane would play the character again. And I don't know how aware people are of this. It was a big deal at the time. But now we're nearly 10 years on, so I don't think it's as big a deal as it was. But in 2012, and I talked about this when I was also doing my Fantastic Four reviews, I talked about how Fantastic Four 2015 felt like a bootleg film, like those Adi Shankar films. And I mentioned The Punisher, Dirty Laundry. What this was a fan film. And this guy Adi Shankar has a whole series of doing these. He did one for like Power Rangers. He did one for Venom. Just these kind of non-licensed fan films, which are different take on the characters. I don't know was this the first one, but it's certainly probably the most high-profile one he did. And it's basically just a short Punisher fan film with Thomas Jane back as the Punisher. And honestly, I didn't finish the Punisher Netflix series, unless that really upped its ante. This is one of the better iterations of the Punisher. It very loosely is a sequel in that it has the same character and same actor playing the Punisher. It was released in 2012. I will say quality-wise it hasn't aged well. It doesn't look like it's shot in good definition. The aspect ratio of it's really weird, at least on the official version on YouTube, so hopefully they put out a better one at some point, but probably not considering it's nearly 10 years now. It tries to be cinematic at times, and at other times it kind of fails at that. Visually, it's got a kind of color grading that I think works, but again, looks kind of cheap. The music is all from The Dark Knight, which doesn't suit and is really aged poorly. And that's what bootleg is the word here. It stole The Dark Knight's music. He's wearing a New York Yankees cap, but it's not a New York Yankees cap because they get suit, so it's like a knockoff, very bootleg. And it's kind of funny. So it's called Dirty Laundry for a reason. Frank is living out of a van and he has to do his laundry. There's some things here that I find cool, like just problems Frank Castle would naturally have. Like he goes to do his laundry, and he notices that one of his t-shirts has a bullet hole in it. He notices that in his spare change he's got bullet casings. It's happened to the best of us. And while he's there, he sees a woman being harassed by some drug dealers. He's seemingly assaulted, but we don't see it. And we see a kid being roughed up, being told, like, you're going to deal for us if you're going to stay in this street, blah, blah, blah. And Frank at first kind of minds his own business. But he steps out there briefly while his laundry is on, and the guy is like, what are you looking at? Whatever. Who are you? And he shows him a gun. And he kind of threatens Frank, and Frank kind of ignores him and walks across to a bodega across the road, where he sees Ron Perlman, who's in a wheelchair behind the counter. And, he's like, hey, whiskey's on offer if you wanted. We got an offer on Jack Daniels, blah, blah, blah. And we find out that Ron Perlman's character is a former veteran, and he tells him how that Frank is, seeing a usual occurrence, that he's standing where Frank used to stand, and a couple of years ago he tried to break it up and stop all this, and he was crippled. And he's basically like, what's the point? Anytime you kind of kill off these guys or finish them off, more pop up in their place. Frank, before, when he said, like, I don't want any whiskey, he was like, I'm 6 months sober. He says he has a change of heart, and he gives him some money and says, I'll take a bottle of Jack. And you're like, oh, Frank's going to go drinking, awesome. So the kid is being held to the wall by drug dealers with a knife, and Frank beats them up with a bottle, the most durable bottle I've ever seen. Doesn't smash ever. He's going around, he takes it out, he smashes them. It's really violent and bloody, which suits the character. It is that, like, weird digital blood that is, hit and miss at times, but he's smashing them in. There's blood everywhere. There's bloods on the walls. He's smashing it, their teeth, breaking their bones. It's really violent. It's like the only action beat in the trailer is this part, really. And he's doing all this, and he's just beating the fuck out of them. The bottle still doesn't break, thank God. And he gets to the lead guy, and the lead guy points a gun at him, and the kid he was fighting bites the drug dealer, and he stumbles, and Frank manages to get up to him and break his legs, break all of his bones, so that the drug dealer is now on the floor. And Frank delivers the line, "You know the difference between justice and punishment?" And he empties the bottle of Jack all over him, takes out a Zippo lighter, lights it, but just leaves it at his feet, and then walks away. And he's doing this, the woman that he abused comes back, picks up the Zippo, and as Frank is collecting his laundry, we see a big flash of fire in the background. She's killed the drug dealer, and Frank takes his laundry and is walking back to his van, and a kid says, "Hey, mister, you dropped this." And he says, "Oh, you can keep it as a bullet hole." And he unfurls it, and it's the Punisher skull. And I fucking hate the Punisher skull in this. Apparently it was a reveal of the new Punisher skull designed by Bradstreet. What's his name? Tim Bradstreet, I think it is. Who is a great artist. He did some amazing work on the Punisher, and he also did a lot of work on Constantine, or Hellraiser. Tim Bradstreet, yeah. I hate the skull though in this. It looks really weird. Looks like an octopus or something. I'll say this, my skull is better. and with that, the Punisher drives off, and that is the end of the Punisher Dirty Laundry, and that is the end of Thomas Jane's run as the Punisher. As for why he made this, basically, he said, "I wanted to make a fan film as a character I've always loved and believed. A love letter to Frank Castle and his fans. It was an incredible experience with everyone on the project, throwing in their time and just for the fun of it. It's been a blast to be part of from start to finish. We hope the friends of Frank enjoy watching it as much as we did making it." I think this is his best run as the Punisher. I think he's really good in this. As much as it's really short, I think this is also one of the best iterations of the Punisher. Like, even the fact that he doesn't get involved initially. I think that's suiting the character, and that it is as violent as that. And also that he doesn't do the final blow, he lets someone else do it. I think that's just perfect. It's really, really good. Again, I don't know as visually has it aged all that well. There is some things that haven't aged, but it's still pretty satisfying as a fan film. And, who would have ever thought that would be the last iteration of Thomas Jane as the Punisher? It's a shame, he never really got a proper go of it, but I think the fact that he came back, and he came back after Warzone had flopped at the box office. But it shows some real respect and reverence for the character, so good on him. It's a shame he never got the perfect theatrical outing, but there you go. It ends on a happy note. And as I said, that came after Warzone. But next week, we are going to talk about The Punisher Warzone, or just Punisher Warzone. A film that had massive creative difficulties behind the scenes, apparently. The only outing of Ray Stevenson as the Punisher, in a film that is interesting. I'm not going to say my thoughts on it. There is stuff in this that's kind of cool. It's a very different and very unique film, and that's what we're talking about next week. So make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out. If you did enjoy this, make sure you hit that like button, and either way, please come back next week when we jump into the Warzone, because remember, I'll be watching. Take care.